Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining and welcome to the presentation Accessible but Make It Understandable. Digital accessibility is more important than ever as technology increasingly shapes nearly every aspect of our daily lives. So, this raises a crucial question: how can we make sure no one is left behind in this transformation? My name is Lilia. I am head of QA at MGM Technology Partners, member of the German Testing Board, computer scientist, senior software developer, and expert in software quality assurance with the main focus on test automation. In case you would like to connect with me on LinkedIn, so feel free to follow the QR code. And throughout the presentation, you will also see a few other QR codes. These will take you then to sources related to each topic in case you would like to dive deeper. Now let's move to the agenda. After a short motivation, we will take a look at some interesting statistics. Then I will explain the legal and technical foundations of digital accessibility with a particular focus on the European and German context. After that, I will highlight the difference between usability and accessibility. And finally, if you have made it that far, I have a little bonus for you. So let me start with the definition of digital accessibility. Digital accessibility refers to the design and development of digital applications in a way that enables all users, including those with disabilities, to effectively perceive, understand, navigate, and interact with the digital content, ensuring equal access for all users. This is really crucial. So, to understand why digital accessibility matters, let's take a closer look at who is affected. So, affected are individuals with physical, cognitive, or sensory disabilities. In some cases, the disabilities are situational, for example, an accident. And in some other cases, individuals might experience multiple overlapping impairments, making their needs even more complex. So in Germany, around 1 in 8 people lives with a disability, and globally, this figure rises to 1 in 6. So these numbers clearly demonstrate why digital accessibility is not optional, but really essential for inclusion and equal access. Now let's move to some statistics. There is a very interesting US organization called Web Accessibility in Mind, for short WebAIM, founded in 1999, that aims to make the internet more accessible for people with disabilities. So they test yearly 1 million, a high number and very representative, 1 million homepages using their own accessibility testing tool called WAVE. Then they publish yearly, almost end of March, the 1 million report containing very interesting representative statistics. So in the year 2020, 98% of the tested homepages violated at least one of the WCAG accessibility success criteria, which I will introduce later. And every homepage has an average of almost 61 accessibility errors. So horribly high figures. Let's see what happened 4 years later. So here you see there is a slight decrease, but still very high figures. So almost 96% violate the WCAG success criteria, and we have an average of almost 57 errors per homepage. Then this year, so 1 year later, the figures decreases slightly, but still high. So almost 95% violate the WCAG success criteria, and we have an average of 51 errors per homepage. Let's dive a bit deeper. 96% of the identified errors can be classified in 6 categories. First of all, we have low contrast text, almost 80%. We have over 50% missing alternative text for images. So for blind users, there is an image but no description what's about. Then almost 50% missing label for input fields and forms. Over 40% empty link, which means users won't know what the link does. And we have almost 30% empty button, which means screen reader will announce button but no description. So you have a button but you don't know what it does. And last but not least, missing document language, almost 15%. These categories are very interesting. Why? Because from the testing perspective, if I would like to conduct risk-based accessibility testing for my application because I ran out of time and I would like to quickly achieve high test coverage, I would first focus on exactly these 6 categories. So if we zoom out, we can see that between the years 2019 and 2025, there has been a slight improvement across the 6 categories, but we don't see a big improvement, right? So the question is here, what's holding back faster progress? Why we are not improving? So one possible explanation for me is that the complexity of websites has increased dramatically in the last years. In 2025, a homepage contains more than 1,257 UI elements on average. So logically, when the complexity of the website increases, the error rate inevitably also increases. So this is a possible explanation why the figures are not improving faster. Now let's move to legal and technical foundations of digital accessibility in the context of Europe and Germany. Before we get started, I would like to explain the difference between the terms directive and standard. By the way, we say EU directive, but European standard and not EU standard. Sounds crazy, but it's true. So EU directive is a legal act used by the European Union to set out goals that all EU member states must achieve. So it defines what to be achieved. So for example, websites should be accessible, what to be achieved, but it does not provide any technical details on how to implement this. Each member state must transpose the directive into national law within a given time frame, and this directive becomes binding for citizens and companies once it has been transposed into national law. On the other hand, European standards are recommendations. Basically, they answer the question how to achieve the things, how to achieve accessibility. They are recommended technical specifications. They provide technical details and methods to achieve accessibility. The European standard becomes de facto legally binding when once it is referred to in a directive. Now, let me give you a more simple example to illustrate the difference between a directive and a standard. Let's say the directive is telling make an apple pie. I don't care how you bake it, but the result should be an apple pie. So on the other side, the standard is then the recipe, including ingredients, baking time, temperature, and other details. Now let's talk about the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, for short WCAG. This is the technical standard worldwide for accessible web. So we talk here about recommendations. WCAG recommended technical requirements to ensure that digital content is accessible to anyone. So there are considered binding when, so there are binding guidelines when officially mandated by law or standards. Then they are binding. Okay, now let's take a look at the historical evolution of WCAG. So in 1999, WCAG 1.0, this was the first version, was released. It was tailored to HTML and earlier web technologies and therefore quickly outdated. In 2008, the version 2.0 was released. It was technology independent, and this is important. And it introduces the four principles of accessibility that I will present later. It also defines 61 success criteria, including 3 conformance levels, A, double A, triple A, that I will show later as well. 10 years later, the version 2.1 was released. It has not overwritten 2.0, but extended it with further 17 success criteria. That's why we say backward compatible. And then 5 years later, the version 2.2 was released, extending the previous one, so extending 2.0 and 2.1 with 9 further success criteria. Regarding WCAG 3.0, so this version is still under development. So it's a working draft, and realistically, this version will not be available as a finalized standard before 2028, I guess. So I like this view because it explained all. What you see here is a representation of WCAG 2.1. At the top, you will find the 4 core principles of accessibility. These principles are broken down into 13 guidelines. Under each guideline, you can see the corresponding success criteria, starting with the 61 from WCAG 2.0, followed by the 17 additional ones introduced in WCAG 2.1. The success criteria are divided into 3 levels of conformance: level A in red, level double A in yellow, and level triple A in gray. So altogether, WCAG 2.1 includes 78 success criteria across all 3 levels. Now let's go to the 4 principles of accessibility. First of all, perceivable. Users must be able to see or hear the content. This includes providing text alternatives for non-text content like images and videos. Also using sufficient color contrast and offering captions or audio descriptions. Then the second principle is operable. Users must be able to navigate and interact with the content. This is crucial, even without a mouse. So this includes ensuring keyboard accessibility, providing enough time to complete tasks, also important, and avoiding content that might cause seizures like flashing elements. The third principle is understandable. So content should be clear and readable. Interfaces should behave in a predictable way. Users should be helped to avoid and correct mistakes, for example, like form errors. The last principle is robust. So the code behind the digital content should be clean and standardized so that it works well across different devices, browsers, and most importantly, assistive technologies like the screen readers. Also, if I maximize my screen, the submit button is still accessible. This is very important for me. This is robust. Now let's move to the conformance levels. There are three conformance levels we talked about. So we have level A. This is the basic, the minimum level of accessibility. Then the level AA, which is the extended accessibility. This level is a recommended level for most websites. And then we have AAA, the maximum accessibility, the highest level of accessibility. So this level has as target group people with complex or multiple disabilities. In practice, AAA is very difficult to fully implement. Now let's have a closer look at key milestones in European and German accessibility legislation. In 2016, the EU directive mandates that European member states ensure accessibility of public sector websites and mobile applications. So here the focus is public sector. The technical standard for implementation in the public sector is the European standard with the version 2.1.2, which refers to WCAG 2.1 at the levels A and AA. In the same year, so in 2018, in the same year as the standard, this directive has been then transposed in German law. This is regarding the public sector. In 2019, a second EU directive followed. This is the famous European Accessibility Act. It did not replace the previous one, which is 2016 public sector, but it extended it with requirements to include the private sector. So 2016 is the public sector, 2019 is the private sector. The technical standard for implementation in the private sector is the European standard with the version 3.2.1, which also refers to the WCAG 2.1 at the levels A and AA. By the way, the WCAG 2.2 has not yet been incorporated into any official standard. The inclusion is planned but not expected until 2026. Until then, WCAG 2.1 remains the applicable technical reference. The European Accessibility Act is being transposed into German law through the Accessibility Reinforcement Act, which has been in effect since June of this year. The Accessibility Reinforcement Act requires private sector economic operators to provide accessible products and services. This obligation extends to areas such as banking, transportation, and other essential services. Notably, the most significant area of application are e-commerce services. If you would like to dive deeper, please follow the QR code. Now let's move to what is the difference between usability and accessibility. According to ISTQB syllabus, usability consists of three important pillars. First of all, effectiveness. So does the software product do what I want? Am I able basically to achieve my goal or my task? Like, for example, submitting my task form, my tax form. And so this is effectiveness. Efficiency is, does the software product solve my task quickly, or is it inconvenient and time consuming to complete the task? This is efficiency. And the last important pillar is satisfaction. Do I feel comfortable while using the software product? Let me give you a small example to highlight satisfaction. Maybe you know those new designed water bottles where the lid stays attached when you open it. So I can even drink quickly, but I am not satisfied because while drinking, the lid presses against my nose, which is bothering me. So this illustrates satisfaction in the context of usability. So if we consider usability with its three pillars, usability target all users of the product. Accessibility, on the other hand, is targeting people with disabilities, focusing on effectiveness rather than efficiency or satisfaction. Effectiveness rather than efficiency or satisfaction. Yeah. So finishing the task rather than efficiency and satisfaction. Why am I mentioning the target groups and also the differences? When adapting your application for accessibility, please don't forget that your application also has to remain usable for all users. This is very important. Usability and accessibility should work together in the same direction to enhance the user experience for all users, but they should not work against each other. This is a very important aspect, and I will give you a real example. For a web application, a designer, an accessibility expert, and a developer have designed, implemented, and deployed a synthetic tooltip which is 100% accessible. Unfortunately, this tooltip wasn't the user experience for the majority of the users immensely. This synthetic tooltip was oversized and behaved differently from standard tooltips. As a result, users frequently had to move the mouse aside just to access actions hidden beneath it. So the tooltip severely undermined both the satisfaction and efficiency aspects of the user experience. Yeah? So keep in mind, usability and accessibility should not conflict. And keep in mind, accessibility stakeholders are not necessarily the usability stakeholders. Now we come to the bonus. Accessibility testing can be overwhelming if we try to cover everything. Not possible. A risk-based approach helps us define the scope, assess where biggest risks are, and focus our efforts where it matters most. So on this slide, I collected a few key questions. One of them is, what is the purpose of the test? What is the legal minimum requirement I need to cover? This is important. Then, which user groups are particularly affected so that I can focus on them first? Which device and modalities are most frequently used? Maybe screen readers. And then, which pages, or especially functions, are especially critical? Which ones, so that I can focus on them first? What would be the impact of a barrier in those areas? Very important question. And then, which type of barriers have the highest impact? Maybe you remember the 6 categories we had at the beginning. Maybe we focus on them first. And then by answering this question, we can identify and prioritize the high risk areas and then efficiently combine testing methods where they add really the most value. And then we can derive actions and raise awareness. Yeah, this is important so that we can be efficient when testing accessibility. Accessibility is also about staying connected and learning from each other. One great opportunity for that is the Global Accessibility Awareness Day. It takes place every year in May. So next year it will be May 21. On that day, you will find free talks, workshops, online conferences happening all over the globe, including, for example, the AXOCON by the Q Systems. So if you are interested, I really recommend taking part. Now, to sum up, digital accessibility is about ensuring that everyone can access, understand, and interact with digital content and services. Is not just a legal requirement or a technical checklist. It's not. It's about inclusion, equal opportunity, and building technology that truly works for all. So, my take home message to you is an inclusive digital future begins where accessibility is not an option but the standard. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Take care and goodbye.